Can feel at home, please. Michael Parkinson here.
What's all this thing about most sought-after man among female viewers?
I read in the paper, we did a quote here the other night.
I saw it.
The most sought-after bit of...
No, you came out that old title quote about being the thinking girl's crumpet.
That's right, that's what they said you were.
I wish somebody had buried that quote dead and under 6 feet. It's
Who gave it to you? Who said the
some
thinking...
silly lady journalist in Britain did it, you know, and you've had to live with it ever since.
No, you've had to live with it
well,
ever since.
yeah, I mean, I'd rather be known as a working girl's Rissole.
Does it bother you being they quote you as being... Well,
it only bothers me in the sense that it disturbs family relationships. I mean, the wife's likely to turn to you after an abortive attempt and say, but you are the thinking girl's crumpet. Right. I mean, you are a sex symbol.
Right.
What happened?
Yeah. That's the truth. I guess if you're a sex symbol, you probably always have to prove it at home.
Well, I did an interview once, actually, with Henry Kissinger, last series, actually, and I said to him, is power an aphrodisiac? And he said, yes. That's all he says, Henry Kissinger, yes. Yeah. And I said, do you know it to be so? He said, yes. I said, then you are a sex symbol? He said, yes. I said, well, what's it like being a sex symbol? He said, once they've called you that, you don't have to prove it anymore.
It's a lovely way out.
Right,
it really works. Yeah. What about the second visit here now? I keep picking up the newspapers and reading that it's a big secret about who's going to be on your show.
It's no secret at all. They sort of play ducks and drakes, don't they? And sort of silly game goes on. No, I've done 5 shows already. I'm doing 13. And I've done 5. I've done a one-man show with Robert Helpman, which I always wanted to do, kind of sort of putting down his life. I mean, it was a remarkable international artist. I sometimes think Australia doesn't realise, you know, what a...
He really isn't known, Robert Helpman isn't really known as one of your foremost guests on talk shows. Well, he's into...
Well, I reckon as a talk show host that, I mean, he's the kind of guy I want on the show. I mean, yeah. He's been in the business for 50-odd years. He's articulate, he's funny. He's a marvellous raconteur, a magnificent mimic. You know, nobody's put him down before. You know, nobody's set it down on tape. This marvellous thing now, this videotape, you can put down all these great artists on video. And in 100 years' time, people will say, well, I know what Robert Helpman was like. Yeah. And there it is. And it's a staggering thought. You know, I'd love to know what W.G. Grace was like, or Napoleon Bonaparte. You know, if you videotape them.
That's really a good thought, isn't it? If you would have, if there would have been videotape from those days. I mean, we have to depend on old tin type, whatever you call that process. What was that old process?
I don't know what it was.
Tin plate type.
But it's also, I mean, it's a daunting thought, isn't it? I mean, imagine you and I being put down and reread in 50 years' time.
No, thanks. I think they'd bury it again if they dug it up.
My God, what's that about? Yeah.
Right. I once ran into Robert Helpman at the airport. He was wearing a 3/4 length mink-lined coat.
He's exotic.
Yes, I would say, to say the least, yes.
But we've done also, I've done a show with Don Dunstan and Robin Archer. I've done a show with Barry Humphries, which is a show that's leading off the series on Saturday. And I've done some shows I've been very pleased with. I feel a lot happier this time around Australia. I mean, last year I felt a bit like a sort of Martian. I mean, we've got a common language and a common heritage, I suppose. But it's very difficult coming here and doing a talk.
It is also, it's a great tribute to you and the popularity of you, because coming off the ABC, you don't, and I'm not demeaning anything, it's just that there is not a great bulk of audience that tunes into the ABC for many.
Well, we got fairly good ratings.
You did very well,
I mean,
actually, yes, that's what I'm saying.
I think the phrase is that we stuffed the commercial channel across the, as they say in the business. No, I mean, I was amazed about that. I mean, it did very, very well indeed, and I was astonished. I was particularly astonished, too, at the reaction I got in Australia. The ABC have been showing my shows. They brought them back to 1972. And I arrived at Sydney Airport last year, and I got off the airplane, and I didn't know they'd been going back that far. And I met a woman who did a double take, and she said, it is, isn't it? She said, Michael Parkinson. I said, yes. She said, my God, you've aged. And what they'd done was they'd shown a show the night before, 8 years old, you know.
Tell me the truth. I want to get off the subject. I want to change subject just for a second. Did you stay up till midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the FA Cup the other night?
I stayed up till 5 o'clock celebrating. My money was on West Ham.
Yes, mine was too.
Was
actually,
it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people stay. It's amazing, you know. You get a guy will stay up to 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the FA Cup final, but his wife takes him to a Tupperware party and he falls asleep at 8:30. You know, it's really weird.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary ritual, isn't it? I was amazed that it had that kind of following in Australia. I was amazed that the channel stayed open, that people actually sat up till 2:30 in the morning.
They used to carry it on 7 and the ABC,
Right.
on the 2 networks. They only carried it on the ABC this year, but I'm amazed at that spectacle. That's the last really great people spectacle in the world, of course. But
It is. I mean, that's for sure. There's a lot of pageant about it, and it's not too distorted yet by commercialism. You know, I mean, it's not. There's one problem with it, of course. I mean, I wouldn't go to Wembley myself as a fan now. The last time I went was 6 years ago. I wouldn't go unless it was shelled for 3 days beforehand by the Royal Artillery.
Is that?
Oh, I mean, it's the biggest. There's the biggest gathering of psychopaths and yobbos you've ever been to in your life. I mean, it truly is. And I mean, the behaviour of the crowd is only enhanced and promoted by the behaviour of the players on the field in some circumstances. I mean, it's very, very sad that this great pageant, and you're right in saying that it's one of the great sporting pageants, is marred nowadays by that kind of crowd behaviour. I think you've seen the newsreels. I mean, tonight, what happened at the Scottish Cup final.
No, I didn't see it.
Well, it's amazing what happened.
But don't tell me the result. I might get it on tape.
Oh, you don't know the result?
I don't know.
No, Celtic won.
You don't know what I go through. Hey, listen, let me ask you a question. Just one thing. You know what the fun part of watching a soccer match from England is trying to figure out what they're singing in the stands all the time.
Yes.
And there's one thing that I can never. They sing, we shall not be moved, we shall not be moved. And I hear, in the FA Cup, we shall. What are those words in between?
I think they're deliberately distorted. You can possibly do them on this show here. The chants in the main are obscene. And that's been the difference, actually. I mean, when I first started watching football, you know, from the age of 5 onward, you got a lot of wit from the terraces. But that's been replaced with now, sadly, and it's a mark of the times, is obscenity. And you actually would not want to take your maiden aunt, or indeed your nearest and dearest, with you to a football match today. I mean, obscenity is the key word. It's around the ground.
I was watching the match with some friends, and one particular friend said to me, he went to see a match. Manchester United is supposed to have the biggest following in England.
Oh, yes, they have the most passionate following, apart from Liverpool.
And he said that when they finish the match at home at Manchester United, that they run from the stadium to the bus or the underground, because you don't dare get caught in the streets because they turn cars over and break
sure.
them.
And the problem about it, too, you see... I mean,
And that's when they win.
That's when they win, right.
Yeah, right.
The extraordinary thing about it is that, I mean, they're kind of these poison dwarfs who go along. I mean, they're not even sort of well-built yobbos. I mean, they're kids of 13 and 14 who cause a problem. I mean, Peter Cook got dusted up about 4 years ago. I mean, he had the cardinal sin at Man United of wearing the Spurs favours. And he was turned over by a gang of 12 kids, the oldest of which he said to me was 12 years old. I mean, they kicked hell out of him.
Did they?
It's terrifying. I mean, last time I went to a football match up in the Midlands, we got into the train coming back, and it was Spurs supporters again. And the train was stopped 15 times between Coventry and London. Police dogs on. They were doing charming things, like ripping out the toilets and throwing them through the window. You know, just clean, wholesome sport.
Yes, right, yeah.
I mean, it's very, very bad. It's very serious, actually.
Letting their energy off.
But it's sad. It's really sad. You would be very ill-advised nowadays in Britain. You get a very cosmetic view of British soccer here, I'll tell you. You'd be very ill-advised to take a kid to a football match nowadays. Never mind let him go by himself.
Well, thank goodness, though, and I'm not being condescending, but it is still a family thing in Australia.
Yeah, right.
Football matches take the family out.
It's certainly not that. I mean, you wouldn't take your worst enemy to it.
Speaking of sport, the last time you were on the show with me here, we talked about Muhammad Ali, right? And I said, I must sort of go over this. I said to you, oh no, you said to me, are you going to interview Muhammad Ali? And I said, I don't know yet, I'm not sure. And then you said to me, oh boy, are you in for it? Because you said you had the worst time with him on the show because you had given him something to read, and you didn't know that he couldn't read.
At the time, he was semi-literate, yes.
Right, and he thought that you were having a shot at him, right?
That's right.
And then there was a very funny tag about you. Well, I'll show you what it was anyway. This is what we were talking about. Here, have a look at this. This was your last appearance here. The audience doing
It was stunned silence. I mean, because what they were seeing was the dark side of the moon. They were seeing an aspect of him that they'd never seen before, nobody had. Yeah. It wasn't the joker, the clown. It was somebody who had lost his temper. And I sat there and I thought, either I walk off, in which case there's no show. Either I argue back and shout back, in which case we've got two irrational people going at one another, or else I ride it out. And I rode it out. And at the end of the show, he went that way, I went that way. And my father was a Yorkshire miner, as you mentioned, and about 5'7", and very plain spoken and blunt.
Yeah.
Yorkshire miners don't say much, but when they do, they mean it. You know?
Yeah.
And I went to my dressing room, and I was sitting there, feeling very despondent. and there's a knock at the door. My dad came in, and he looked at me and said, now then. He said, what's the reckon? I said, not much, Dad. He said, what were up with thee? I said, me? I said, what was up with him? He said, nay, it was thee, lad. He said, why didn't I thump him?
Well, I could see where you would be hesitant in thumping up Muhammad Ali, but the truth of the matter is that later that year, I never even knew it was going to happen, quite by accident, we got him, and we were talking to him. He was up in Sydney. We were down here. We had him up on the screen behind us. I got in a punch-up with Muhammad Ali and came out without a scratch. Look at this here, I'll show you what. Hey, I can't thank you enough for doing all of this and for doing the show, and I hope I see you down here for the Logie Awards tomorrow night. It would be a pleasure.
I'll try to make it. Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you for taking the time. The greatest, ladies and gentlemen, Muhammad Ali. Our pleasure. That's the safe thing, right? We'll be back in just a minute with Michael Parkinson. We got lots more for you. We got lots more to talk about, too. Hang on a minute. Of course, you and I once talked about people we would like to interview, you know, and we both said the same thing, the man, Sinatra, of course. But you did pull off a coup this year. You got yourself Robert Redford.
Yeah, I did.
How did that come about?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's only ever done one interview before in his life. He'd not done it in America, as you know. He did one in Britain about 10 years ago, and he came over and just did my show. And it caused a tremendous furore in the press. I mean, one journalist actually wrote, who'd not been knocked back by Redford, that the reason why Redford didn't want to be seen by the journalists was because he got a face full of pimples. Of course, Redford came in the studio and went to the camera like that, and then went like that, with no makeup, and he looks beautiful, goddamn him. Kicking. But it's rather amazing, because people had accused him. You read the cuttings, and he's got no sense of humour and that sort of thing. And I did 45 of the easiest, nicest minutes I've done in my life with anybody. I mean, I found it to be amazingly humorous, self-deprecating. A lovely story. I was in his dressing room. He'd been in the studio, and he was way around. I was in the dressing room talking to him, and I said to him, well, I'm going in now. And he said, well, I'll follow you in. I know where it is. And he came in late, and he was laughing, and I said, what happened? And I mean, there were people hanging off the rafters, and you imagine the women hanging there, you know.
Yeah, right.
Terrible. And wanting to do awful things.
Disgusting what they'll do for a good-looking... Yes, it's terrible.
We don't have that problem, do we?
No.
and he came in, and he said, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, I arrived at the door of the studio, and we had this commissionaires at the BBC, you know, with the medal ribbons and the caps, you know. Yeah. And the guy said, ticket? He said, no, I don't have a ticket. The man said, oh, you can't come in here without a ticket, sir. So Redford said, no, but I think you'll find there's a seat in there for me. Redford said, the man said, no, sir. He said, you don't understand. He said, oh, ticket only, this show, ticket. If you haven't got a ticket, you can't come in. So Redford said, I do think you'll find a seat for me in there. And the man said, look, sir. He said, do you know who's in the studio today? It's Mr. Parkinson's guest. Robert Redford said, no. He said, Robert Redford, that's who. And it's Robert Redford who's talking to him. Yeah. And Redford had to go to his dressing room, phone up the control box to get his director down to let him in.
That's funny. There was an old cricket story here about that one time, a cricketer trying to get into the match or something, and he had to leap over the gate. But you had there's a funny oft-quoted story from you about the audience and one person starting to walk out on you in the audience one time.
Have you ever heard that?
Not in here, no. Unfortunately, I
God.
haven't. I don't know. I keep my back to it.
I was doing a show, and I was doing an interview, and a man stood up and said in a very loud voice, crap. I didn't know whether he was asking where it was or making a statement, you know. And I waited, and again he said, this is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard. And I thought, come on. And I mean, normally, you sit through that. If a studio roof falls in, you sit through it. I thought, I'm not going to have this. So I turned around, I said, and I stopped the tape, and I said, come on, what's up with you? He said, it's crap. I said, well, you know, why did you come in the first place? He said, I didn't want tickets for your show. He said, I asked for tickets for Morecambe and Wise.
So you've got to, now, let me see. Michael Parkinson is gone, you're in partnership now with David Frost. You're going to be producing shows, you're doing everything. Now they tell me there's an album on the
I see. No, well...
No, come on.
Yeah, well,
you're singing, right?
Well, what it is was, they got 10 of us in Britain, 10 faces, who are not normally associated with singing, to record drinking songs. Right, 10 drinking songs. They got Spike Milligan, Oliver Reed.
That's a drinker.
He's not bad, he's world class.
Sure.
Myself, and I'm probably second division compared to Oliver Reed. Joanna Lumley, And people like that, and they've got this idea of doing drinking songs. And they came to me, and I'd always had this sort of frustration about, I would love to do your sort of song and dance routine like you do, but I can't. I'm totally on music. I love music, but I'm unmusical. I only ever sang once before in my life, and that was with Bing Crosby. And Crosby said to me, if you show the slightest sign of talent, son, at the end of this duet with me, I'm going to retire. And I sang with him, and I turned to him, I said, what about it, Bing? He said, guess I'm back on the road again for another 50 years. I mean, it really was lousy. But anyway, I've done this thing. It's coming out in September, and it's a drinking song my father taught me. He only ever taught me the first verse of it because he used to collapse up the first verse, and I only ever got that one. And I don't know where it comes from at all. It's an old wartime, Second World War.
If you sing more than one verse, you can't be drinking very well, right?
Well, what I've had to do is write a second verse, and I've written a second verse specially for this show, actually, because we were talking about the man, Muhammad Ali, right? So I've written one about him. But listen, this is a joke. Please explain, and people who have tendered this position should go to bed or switch off or something, because I've got the most
Just
horrid
before you
voice
do
in
the
world.
song, tell him what happened when you did a boxing set, or you saw Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier changing clothes.
Can I tell that
Yes,
story?
good, tell me.
Can I?
Go ahead. Please, it doesn't matter.
You sure?
Yes.
Well, I did a
If the kids are listening, tell them to go away from it.
I did a film with Ali and Frazier, and I had to train with both of them for the purpose of this film. And if you train with somebody, I mean, you change with them, you shower with them, so you get to know one or two intimate personal details about athletes. And all I can say is that if Ali and Frazier were racehorses, that Ali would win by 3 clear lengths. So that was.
Do you want to stand up and do this? Or do you have to do
Can I just finish the story? Because what happened was that I had to interview Ali, and you know there are 2 ways that you say he can go. He can either answer the question or he goes shooting off his mouth, you know. And I was a bit tired and jaded, and I asked him the question, and he just went on about, he went in the routine. You know, I was bigger than Joe Frazier, I was better than Joe Frazier, I was prettier than Joe Frazier. And he went on and on and on for 10 minutes. And he came to the end of it, and I looked at him, I said, you missed something out. He said, what's that? I said, you've got a bigger willy than Joe Frazier. And he looked at me, he said, man, he said, you ain't as dumb as you look.